My name is Selena. When I look back at my life, it feels like a collection of sacrifices stitched together with invisible tears. I was never extraordinary, but I had extraordinary dreams. As a little girl, I would sit near the window of our small house and stare at the stars, imagining myself traveling to places far away, studying in big universities, maybe becoming someone who could change the world. I dreamed of being more than just a shadow in someone else's story. But life had its own script for me. I grew up in a family where love was abundant, but money was always missing. My parents worked so hard, every single day, yet it always felt like the world demanded more than we could give. Still, they smiled through the struggle, and so did I. But even as a child, I could feel it deep inside me. One day, I would have to put away my dreams. One day, my life would not be mine alone. And that day came much sooner than I ever imagined. There was a time in my life when everything seemed possible, when hope felt like sunlight touching my face every morning. I remember those years as the only time my heart was light, unburdened by the storms that were waiting ahead. I was still just a teenager, but I believed I could change everything. I believed education was my way out, the golden key that could open doors my family had never even seen. Every morning, I would wake up earlier than anyone else in the house. I would sit by the small window in our room, where the rays of the sun slipped through the torn curtains, and I would start reading. Sometimes it was history, sometimes mathematics, sometimes just stories of women who had fought against their circumstances and built their own names in the world. I admired them. I wanted to be like them, strong, fearless, unstoppable. My teachers encouraged me, and their words became my strength. One of them once said, "Selena, you are not just another student. You carry something rare inside you, the hunger to rise higher. Don't let it die." And I never forgot those words. At school, I was known as the girl who always had answers. I won debates, I wrote essays that made even my principal proud. I solved equations when others gave up. For the first time in my life, I felt special. I felt like the universe had chosen me for something more. At home, my parents would look at me with quiet hope in their eyes. They didn't say it out loud, but I knew. I was their dream. They had struggled all their lives, surviving day to day, never having the chance to chase anything bigger. But through me, they believed it was possible. Through me, they saw a different future. And I wanted so badly to give it to them. I wanted to be the daughter who could change their fate. I would close my eyes at night and imagine myself walking into a university lecture hall, books in my hands, wearing clothes that didn't look worn out, and holding my head high with confidence. In those dreams, I wasn't just Selena, the poor girl from a forgotten street. I was someone who mattered. And in those moments, life felt beautiful. In those moments, I truly believed my story would be different. But life has a way of taking away the very things you hold closest to your heart. Dreams, no matter how big, are fragile. And mine were about to break. I don't know exactly when the cracks began to appear in my perfect little dream, but I remember the first time I felt fear settle in my chest. It was the day my father lost his job. He came home earlier than usual, his face pale, his eyes heavy with something he couldn't hide. He sat down on the old wooden chair and didn't speak for a long time. My mother kept asking him what had happened, but he stayed silent, staring at the floor like it had answers he couldn't find. When he finally spoke, his voice broke me. "They said they don't need me anymore." I was too young to fully understand what it meant, but I could feel the weight of those words pressing on the walls of our small house. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to convince myself that it was temporary, that things would go back to normal, that I would still be able to chase my dreams. But life had already started shifting beneath my feet. The days that followed were filled with whispers of worry, unpaid bills, and arguments my parents tried to hide from us. I could see the change in my mother's eyes. She became quieter, more tired. My father spent hours searching for work, returning with nothing but disappointment. And slowly, the responsibility of survival began to push everything else away. I still went to school, but the lightness in my heart was fading. While other students laughed in the hallways and planned for their futures, I carried the fear of losing mine. I started skipping small joys, no more new notebooks, no more pens, no more proper lunches. I pretended it didn't matter, but deep inside, I knew every missing piece was a step away from the life I had dreamed of. Teachers still praised me, but their words no longer felt like promises. Instead, they felt like reminders of everything I was at risk of losing. One evening, I heard my parents talking in hushed voices. My mother said, "How will we afford her education now?" And my father, with a trembling voice, replied, "Maybe it's time to stop thinking about dreams we cannot pay for." I can't describe the way my chest burned hearing those words. It was like someone had reached inside and stolen the very air I breathed. For the first time, I realized that sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you try or how bright your talent is. Sometimes, the weight of poverty is stronger than all the dreams you can carry. And that night, I cried silently into my pillow, praying for a miracle, praying that somehow the universe wouldn't let me fall. But deep down, I already knew. The cracks in my world were growing, and soon, they would shatter everything. I still remember the exact morning when life stopped pretending to be normal. The sun was rising, but instead of warmth, I felt a coldness in the air. My father had just returned from another failed attempt to find work. His shoulders were slouched, his eyes dim, and his hands empty. That day, he looked smaller, as if the weight of the world had finally crushed him. By noon, the landlord arrived at our door. His face carried no kindness, only irritation. He said we were 3 months late on rent and gave us 1 week to leave the house. I watched my mother's hands tremble as she pleaded for more time, but he only shook his head and walked away. His footsteps echoed in my ears like a death sentence. That night, I sat in my corner of the room, hugging my knees to my chest, listening to my parents whisper about where we could go. Their voices were filled with fear and shame. And for the first time, I realized that our life, the life I once thought was stable and strong, was built on fragile ground. The next days felt like a blur. We sold furniture piece by piece, each chair and table carrying away a memory. My father's books, my mother's jewelry, even the old clock that had ticked in our house for years, it was all gone, exchanged for a few bills that vanished almost immediately. School became harder too. I could no longer afford the bus, so I walked for miles every morning. By the time I arrived, my clothes were dusty, my shoes worn out, and I carried a shame I couldn't hide. My friends noticed the change. Some stopped talking to me. Others whispered behind my back. But what hurt the most was the silence of those I had trusted. The same people who once called me brilliant now avoided me, as if poverty was a disease they could catch. Teachers who once encouraged me now looked at me with pity instead of pride. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the classroom, I overheard 2 girls talking about me. "She used to act like she was better than us," one said. "Now look at her. She's nothing." Their laughter cut through me like a knife. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was still the same Selena, still the same girl with dreams, still the same girl who studied harder than anyone. But my voice refused to come out. I just sat there, staring at my hands, wondering how quickly the world forgets you when you no longer shine. At night, I watched my parents fall asleep exhausted, their faces lined with worry. And I kept asking myself, why us? Why did life strip us of everything, one piece at a time? That was the day I realized something painful. The world only loves you when you have something to offer. The moment you lose it, you become invisible. And in that invisibility, my heart began to break. After everything that happened, I realized life wasn't just taking from us, it was taking from me personally. Not just my comfort, not just my freedom, but the very dreams that had once made my heart beat fast. I began to live for everyone else. I cooked, I cleaned, I helped my younger siblings with their studies, I ran errands, I became the glue holding our broken household together. Every smile I put on my face was for my family. Every sacrifice I made was for them. But inside, I was dying. I had no time for myself anymore. My books gathered dust on the shelf. My unfinished essays stared at me every night, whispering reminders of what I had given up. I wanted to scream, to tell the world I am still here. I am still alive. I have dreams too. But no one asked. No one noticed. Love, ambition, joy, these things slowly became strangers to me. I watched my friends move forward in life, achieving things I had once imagined for myself, and I forced a smile. I congratulated them because what choice did I have? I couldn't even admit to myself how much it hurt. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining another life, one where I had gone to college, one where I had pursued my passion for writing, one where I hadn't been forced to sacrifice everything for survival. And yet, I whispered promises to myself. One day, I will find a way. One day, I will rise. But the days blurred into months and months into years. I grew strong on the outside, calm and composed, because that's what everyone needed me to be. And the harder I smiled for them, the heavier my soul felt inside. I realized something that most people never understand. Sacrifice can be noble. Sacrifice can save others. But sacrifice without acknowledgement, without a single moment to breathe, can quietly destroy you. Every meal I cooked for my family, every late night I spent helping my siblings, every tear I swallowed, it was all for them. And still, every night, I cried silently, mourning the girl I had been. The girl who had laughed, who had dreamed, who had believed in a future that could be hers. She was still inside me, buried under layers of duty and responsibility. But she had not disappeared. And somehow, I knew I had to keep her alive, no matter what. There was a time when my heart tried to belong somewhere, even in a life that demanded I give up everything. His name was Adrian. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was just, kind. The kind of person who made you believe in simple joys, who made you forget the heaviness of the world, if only for a moment. We met in the small library near my school. He noticed me struggling with a stack of books, smiled, and offered to help. That smile, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds I had long grown used to. We started talking every day, not just about school, not just about grades, but about life. He listened to my dreams, and he believed in them. He believed in me. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope, to feel, to imagine that maybe, just maybe, I could have a life that included love, laughter, and not just responsibility. But reality has a way of knocking even the strongest hearts to the ground. One evening, after dinner, my mother called me to the kitchen. Her voice was soft but heavy. "Selena, we can't afford anything extra. You know that. You must focus on your siblings. Your dreams, they will have to wait." And I understood in that moment what I had feared all along. I couldn't have both. I couldn't chase my dreams, and I couldn't let myself be loved, not fully, not freely. Not while my family needed me more than my heart needed him. So, I made the hardest choice of my life. I met Adrian in the garden where we first talked, under the fading light of the evening sun. His eyes searched mine, full of hope. I wanted to take his hand and never let go. But instead, I whispered, trembling, "Adrian, I can't. Not now. Maybe someday, but not now." He didn't understand. How could he? How could anyone understand that loving someone, when your life is already full of impossible choices, could be an unbearable luxury? He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "I'll wait," he said softly. But I knew he shouldn't. Because waiting for me meant he would live in a shadow of my sacrifice, and I couldn't let him do that. I walked away that night. Heart in pieces, dreams on hold, love buried deep inside. And in the quiet of my room, I wept. Not just for him. Not just for myself. But for the life I had been forced to leave behind. The life I had wanted so desperately. And the love I could not allow myself to hold. It was the first time I truly understood. Life doesn't just demand sacrifices. It demands the impossible. I often think about the irony of my life. I lived in a house full of people, yet I was alone in every possible way. My siblings laughed, played, and argued around me. My parents were busy surviving, working long hours, their faces weary from the endless struggle. Yet no one really saw me. No one asked how I felt. No one noticed the nights I spent crying silently under my blanket, my dreams buried deep beneath my responsibilities. I would serve them meals I hadn't eaten myself, study lessons I barely had time for, and smile when they praised me for small achievements. All while my own heart screamed for recognition, for love, for a life that was mine. I started to speak less. I stopped sharing my thoughts, my feelings, my fears. Because speaking only reminded me that no one would truly listen. I became invisible. A shadow moving through a crowded home. Even Adrian's absence haunted me. I had given up love to survive, but the emptiness he left behind was harder to endure than any physical struggle. I would see couples laughing in the streets, holding hands, and my chest would tighten. Not because I hated them, but because I remembered what I had chosen to sacrifice. Loneliness is strange. It isn't always a silence that fills the room. Sometimes it lives in the middle of laughter. In the quiet dismissal of your pain. In the way the world expects you to keep giving, without ever asking what you need. I started writing in secret, pouring my heart into notebooks no one would ever see. It was the only way I could speak without being judged, the only place where my dreams still existed. I wrote about the girl I had been, the girl I wanted to be, and the life I had been forced to put on hold. Even in that darkness, a small spark remained. A spark that whispered, "Selena, don't lose yourself completely. Even here, even now, you are still alive." But the truth was hard. Being alive didn't mean being happy. Being alive didn't mean being free. It only meant I had survived. Alone in a crowded home, with my heart breaking silently every day. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like hours. Not just to fix my hair or adjust my clothes, but to look at myself. Really look. I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. Her eyes were tired, dark circles etched like shadows under them. Her lips rarely smiled, and even when they did, the joy didn't reach her eyes. Her shoulders carried the weight of the world, but her heart was broken, quietly screaming for attention. I asked myself, Selena, who are you now? Am I the girl who dreamed of changing the world, or am I just a caretaker, a shadow, a sacrifice? The truth hit me like a cold wind. I had been living everyone else's life, my parents, my siblings, even society's expectations. And in the process, I had completely forgotten who I was. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the pain, the sorrow, the anger. I let the tears come, slowly, steadily, until they blurred the reflection in the mirror. And then, something changed. Behind the tears, I saw a spark. Not a spark of wealth, not a spark of comfort, not a spark of someone else's validation. A spark that belonged only to me. I realized I had been living for everyone else, but I was still alive. I still had my mind, my heart, my spirit. And no one, no circumstance, no sacrifice, no loss could take that away. The mirror didn't just show me my tired face. It showed me resilience. It showed me courage I didn't know I possessed. It showed me a girl who could survive the worst storms and still stand. I whispered to myself softly, trembling but strong. Selena, you are more than what life has made you. You are not just a sacrifice. You are a human being with a heart that deserves to live, love, and dream. That day, in front of a simple mirror, I began to find myself again. Not the girl who had been lost in the shadows, but the girl who had survived. The girl who had endured. The girl who was ready to rise. Life, I realized, has a strange way of offering light even in the darkest corners. For years, I had walked through shadows, carrying burdens that weren't mine to carry, dreaming of a life that seemed impossible. And yet, that morning, something unexpected happened. I was walking through the small park near our home, carrying a stack of papers for my younger brother's school project. The wind was cold, the sky gray, and the streets quiet. And then I saw a group of children sitting on the bench, struggling to read and write. Their textbooks were torn, their pencils broken, their eyes full of frustration. Something inside me stirred. I bent down, smiled, and offered to help. At first, they hesitated. A stranger, after all, doesn't often care about children struggling with simple words. But soon, their faces lit up as I guided them, showing them letters, numbers, and small stories. Their laughter, oh, their laughter. It was the first sound of true joy I had heard in years. I stayed with them every afternoon, teaching, reading, encouraging. The spark I had thought was gone came back to life. I realized that even though I had given up my own dreams, I could still nurture the dreams of others. Even though life had taken much from me, I could still give. And in giving, I found a strange kind of healing. For the first time, I felt a purpose that wasn't dictated by survival alone. I felt needed. I felt alive. Even my family began noticing the change. Noticing that I smiled a little more. Noticing that my eyes held something other than exhaustion. But no one understood the depth of the fire I had reignited inside myself. No one knew that I had finally found a small piece of what I had been missing all those years: hope. Hope, I realized, doesn't come with grandeur. It doesn't need wealth or recognition. It lives in small acts, in moments that seem insignificant, yet change everything. That day, I whispered to myself, looking at the children's smiling faces. Selena, this is your spark. Hold on to it. Protect it. Let it guide you through the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I could survive. Not just survive, but live. Truly live. Years passed, and I kept giving my time, my energy, my heart, without asking for anything in return. I had become the backbone of my family, the quiet strength they depended on, the one who held everything together while the world demanded more. But one day I realized they had forgotten. Forgotten the nights I stayed awake so my siblings could study. Forgotten the meals I skipped so they could eat. Forgotten the dreams I buried to give them a chance. It hit me one evening when my mother casually complained about her tiredness. I had been awake since dawn, helping my younger brother with homework, cleaning, cooking, and running errands. I smiled, pretending it didn't matter, but the truth burned inside me. No one thanked me. No one acknowledged the weight I had carried all these years. No one remembered that I had once been a girl full of dreams who had given everything for their sake. Even Adrian. I had never told him what I had endured. I had never told him the depth of my sacrifice. I had kept it buried, believing that love could wait, believing that survival mattered more than recognition. And now, the silence around me felt heavier than ever. I cried that night silently alone. Not just for my lost dreams, but for the realization that sometimes, even those you love the most forget the battles you fight for them. But in that darkness, I also remembered something. I hadn't given up entirely. I hadn't disappeared. My heart, though bruised and tired, was still beating. And my spirit, though tested and overlooked, was still alive. I decided then that I would no longer measure my worth by the gratitude of others. I would no longer give silently while my soul withered. I would fight for myself, not against them, but for me. Because no one else could value my life if I didn't start doing it myself. And so, for the first time in years, I whispered to myself with trembling strength, Selena, you are not just a sacrifice. You are a human being. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to live. For years, I had lived in silence. I had carried burdens no one knew about. I had given pieces of myself until there was almost nothing left. But one day, I looked in the mirror again. Not the tired, broken reflection I had once seen. Not the shadow of a girl who sacrificed everything, but a woman, still standing, still breathing, still fighting. I realized something profound. I had survived. I had endured. And now it was time to speak. I started small. I wrote letters to my parents, expressing everything I had kept inside. I told Adrian what my heart had endured and why I had walked away. I shared my story with the children I taught, letting them know that dreams are worth fighting for, even when life is unfair. Every word I spoke, every tear I let fall, was liberating. It was as if my soul had been muted for years, and now it was singing again. For the first time, I demanded to be seen. I demanded to be heard. Not angrily, not loudly, but firmly, with the quiet power of someone who had survived countless storms. People began to notice. Not everyone understood. Not everyone appreciated it. But that no longer mattered. Because I finally understood. The world doesn't define you. Circumstances don't define you. Sacrifices don't define you. I define me. I spoke to my family. I told them how much I had given. I told them the dreams I had buried. And I told them, with a heart both broken and strong, that I was still here, still human, still deserving of life, love, and my own future. And in that moment, something shifted. The silence that had suffocated me for so long finally lifted. The shadow of self-doubt began to fade, and I felt alive. I realized then that life isn't about the sacrifices you make for others, or the pain you endure in silence. Life is about finding your voice, even if it comes after years of quiet suffering. And mine, my voice, was finally free. I have spent most of my life giving pieces of myself to others. Pieces I can never get back. Pieces I thought defined me. But now, I understand the truth. I am more than my sacrifices. I am more than the nights I cried in silence. I am more than the dreams I buried so others could live comfortably. I am Selena. I am the girl who dreamed under the stars. I am the woman who stood when life tried to break her. I am the voice that refuses to be silenced, even after years of quiet suffering. I still have scars. Scars from heartbreak, from loss, from being invisible. But each scar tells a story of endurance, a story of strength, a story of survival. I have learned that it's not weakness to be vulnerable. It's strength to rise after being pushed down. It's courage to keep dreaming, even when the world forgets your name. And so, I am no longer the girl who sacrifices herself to fit the expectations of others. I am Selena. And my life, my dreams, my voice, and my heart belong to me. I look at the girl I once was, the one who loved deeply, dreamed boldly, and suffered quietly, and I smile. Because I see her, I honor her, and I carry her with me. And finally, I let myself live. I am Selena. I am not just a sacrifice. I am alive. I am me. And for the first time, that is enough.